Hey everyone, welcome to the I Heart Podcast. My name is Jonathan North, and this month, I Heart Christmas. Today's guest is another person brand new to the show, Sean Chandler of Sean Chandler Talks About. Now, when we were trying to schedule a time to record, our schedules seemed to be lining up about mid-June, just as I was starting to plan my Christmas in July schedule, so I asked Sean if there were any Christmas movies he'd like to talk about, and he chose the Will Ferrell classic, Elf. Now, I'm not sure how many Elf fans I have out there in the audience, but if you're looking at the hour-plus runtime on this episode and expecting a deep dive into the Elf cinematic universe, and I'm sorry to break it to you, but that ended up only being a small portion of what we talked about. Regular listeners will know that I try to do a Q&A with all first-time guests as a way to introduce them to my audience, so Sean suggested that we start with that as a way to get to know each other better before the review, but we ended up talking for almost the whole episode. We talked about all our favorite movies, shows, superheroes, and more, just about everything but Elf. Don't worry, Elf fans, we definitely do get to the movie within the last third of the show, but the rest of this episode is just a fun discussion about all kinds of things. So I guess today, let's get on with this episode talking about all things movies with Sean Chandler, with a short Elf review at the end. So, thanks for joining me. Let's do a little Q&A first to have listeners get to know you a little better. Okay. So, to begin with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Sean Chandler. My channel is Sean Chandler Talks About, and I started my channel on YouTube 3 years ago next month, or depending on when this posts, maybe this month. So July 2016, started on a whim. It's just kind of continuing my lifelong hobby of loving to talk movies too much with no real background in journalism or video production or anything like that. Just decided to start talking about what I was talking about with people in person. And I wanted to talk about certain things a lot more than the people around me wanted to talk about those things. So I thought I'd take it to the internet where there's no shortage of other people that can just keep talking forever about movies, TV, stuff like that. So that's kind of where YouTube stuff came from. But, as for my background, I worked at a church for about 8 years as a youth pastor and backup preacher. And then in the years where I first started this channel, I was for 2.5 years drove a truck delivering paint. And that's actually one of the reasons why I was able to be successful kind of on YouTube and to whatever degree I've been successful is because I had a job that didn't require my mind. So I'd get off work after a day of like walking around in the Texas sun, picking up big old buckets. And I'd be like, I just want to create something. I got to create something. I got to talk about something. I got to use my brain. And so then I get home and I'd have that energy. Not doing anything with my brain for the whole day kind of gave me the energy to want to create stuff. And so, that's where some of that came from. And I've been married for a little over, or almost 13 years now, have 3 kids. And actually the week we're recording this, my wife is in California for the week. I live in Texas. She's in California for the week for a business trip. And my 2 older kids are at their aunt's house for the week. And so it's just me with my baby this week, actually. So dropped her off a couple hours ago so we'd have a little window so we could talk about things. But it's kind of fun. First time I've ever had my baby for just a week. So, and the first time I've had a baby by myself for maybe a week, I think ever. The first time it's been just me as single dad with a baby. It's very much like a movie.
Yeah, that would be difficult for me. I haven't done much with a baby in recent years, although my brothers are starting to have babies. So I'm getting back into being around babies. I don't know if I'd want to be alone with one for a week, though.
It is something. Even, she's 9 months old, so I've been around her for 9 months. But when it's just you, it's like a whole other deal. Like I planned this week to not shoot any videos or do any work really while I have her, because it's just so time consuming, and you have to watch her, and she's at that phase where she can crawl and move around. But then I have older kids, so they're leaving Legos everywhere. So everything that my older kids want to play with will kill the baby if she plays with it. And so, it's everywhere. Our house is a disaster constantly. And so, I planned out my week. Like the video I posted yesterday, I shot on Saturday, edited it mostly before everyone left town. And then right now, baby's at grandma's house. And so everything I'm going to do this week was like carefully planned out a week in advance, because I was like, I can't do anything while I'm watching this baby because it would just drive me crazy trying to shoot. And then she starts screaming or, oh, don't eat that. So, Yeah, it's a lot.
Well, thanks for opening up a window for me, I guess. So my other question was more about how you got into YouTube, but you kind of covered some of that. But did anyone on YouTube or maybe in real life inspire you to start YouTube?
So no one in real life. I had this one thought. I mentioned kind of working with teenagers in church world for actually over 10 years in total. But one of my former students from like years ago, she started a YouTube channel. And I remember the first time I learned she had like 8,000 subscribers and think that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of, that someone could be that. Someone I know has 8,000 subscribers. That's amazing. And it kind of blew my mind. And then, by the time I started, she was like 50,000 subscribers. And as a random and like arbitrary of a standard, but actually passing her in subscribers is like, wow, I've really made it on YouTube. I passed my former student subscribers. But so no one in real life, but I always grew up of the Siskel and Ebert era. And then Leonard Maltin, he had a movie guide that I had growing up and I always read through it. It was always just interesting to hear someone else's take. And he did these interviews with George Lucas that were on the final VHS release of the Star Wars trilogy. And so almost everyone my age had this exact copy of the Star Wars trilogy right before the special editions came out. It's like the last one before special editions, all that jazz. And there's these long interviews and he talked about doing the special editions. He talked about starting to do the prequels. And so at the time, this was pre-YouTube, pre-internet news for everything. So watching those interviews, like, this is amazing. I'm hearing what George Lucas is working on. And so that was kind of like these starting little kernels in my brain. Jump forward a few years later, I put together a AOL.members.com website with my free account with AOL. We're talking about movies a little bit on there. And some of that just kind of came out from movie news type things, Ain't It Cool News, kind of sparked some ideas in my head. And so I'd always kind of jumped in on all the little Zangas and things and live journal that popped up over the years. And then the kind of start of transitioning to YouTube was back 2001 or something like that. John Campion, who's now very prominent in the YouTube space talking movies, he had a show that he was doing on his own time called For Your Consideration. It was like a monthly podcast deal. And he did one with Frosty from Collider.com, and they shared it on Collider. And Collider had a deal with Rotten Tomatoes, so articles from Collider would appear on Rotten Tomatoes. So I was just looking at Rotten Tomatoes, and I saw this For Your Consideration had these news categories. I just clicked on it, and that's kind of I clicked over to this thing and discovered John Campion. And then John Campion started doing this For Your Consideration on AMC, and then he changed the name to Movie Talk. And around the same time, came across people, all the people that everybody knows about: Jeremy Johns, Chris Stuckmans, Flickinger, Schmozno, and all kind of discovered all those types of people. 2012, 2013, around there, kind of watching. And around, if you look at my channel, I started putting up some little movie reviews around 2013 for the first time, 3 years before my channel actually started. Put a few things up, kind of inspired by the Campions, Stuckmans, Johnses of the world. And just always kind of went back to it about every 6 months. Like, I should try that out. I like to talk on camera. I have ideas about things. So that's kind of a little bit of the journey of me kind of discovering YouTube. Those are some of the personalities and kind of the history where all of it came from.
Yeah, for me, I didn't get started on YouTube until a couple of years ago, but it was Rachel Wagner who actually is the one who introduced you when you guys did your Disney Renaissance video. That was what got me onto you, and she encouraged me to start YouTube because we both write for the Rotoscopers animation website. So yeah, I just kind of wrote little things here and there, and then Rachel was the one who kind of pushed me in the direction of YouTube and now podcasting, and yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I actually had a longer history with blogging, not about movies, but other types of things, but never had any traction. Like, failed miserably as a writer. But I learned about how to put package things better and articulate ideas and how to work with the internet. And so when I started on YouTube, I took all of the things I learned from doing poorly at writing and blogging and applied it to YouTube, and I've had a lot more success here than I ever had writing. I need to. One of these days, I need to get back into it to see it. I want to lose the skill set, but
Yeah, I started with blogging. Like back in 2010 is when I started writing,
Mhm.
and my blog is just everything. Like I did little movie reviews, stuff about my life, pictures, and I still add to the blog, but nobody reads it except
Yeah.
it's just for me basically. But that's what
Right.
started me on everything.
And I started doing those types of kind of like and everything kind of blog deal. I think Live Journal was the first one I did like that, and I did that for a while, and then it seemed like the traffic shifted over to Zanga, so I
Hmm.
was on Zanga for a while, and then around 2009 started doing the try to have something a little bit more focused, or failed horribly being focused at all, but around 2009, 2010, and with Blogger, and
Hmm.
then switched that one over, like transitioned that exact one over to WordPress, but then haven't done anything out with that in a long, long time.
Yeah, I still do it occasionally. I do like 1 to 2 posts a month, but like I said, it's mainly just for me because I think it's fun.
Yeah,
The main thing I'm trying to get an audience on is the podcast and YouTube.
yeah,
I don't think there's much of an audience for blogging anymore. Like a decade ago there was, but I don't think there
right.
really is anymore.
Yeah, when you have all these social media platforms that kind of scratch that
Hmm.
itch
Yeah.
in a way that's easier to kind of put out there. Certain things, it's just like ideas can be shared in so many different ways, and every average Joe can kind of the stuff that I was doing on Live Journal and Zanga was like, here's what I've been doing today. I can just post like right now. I could pick up my phone, shoot a little thing while we're doing this podcast, put it on my Instagram stories, and it's
Hmm.
just out there. I don't have to sit down and write out my day. I can just share my day as it's happening, literally while I'm recording a podcast.
Hmm. So the next few questions are a little harder to answer for me. They might be easier to answer for somebody else. But what is your favorite movie? Or if you can't pick a favorite movie, you can just say a few of your favorites.
I would tend to be kind of on your page of I'm not great at picking favorites. I actually hate picking favorites,
Hmm.
which is funny because I'm like on YouTube known for ranking things, which people put the two together and they say, oh, of course you have a bunch of favorites. You make lists all the time. Like, it's not the same thing. Like a comparative list of a type group isn't really the same thing as, hey, look at all movies and pick your favorite. The
Hmm.
thing about like when you talk about all movies, it's all these different genres, and I appreciate the diversity of all these different things, and they bring different things to the table. And so you really are kind of comparing apples to oranges when you're like, all right, comparing my favorite movie from the last 10 years to, you know, the stuff I grew up with. It's just so it's my heart. I can't. And so my list of favorite movies that I put out before, it's very much the movies that were my formative years. Superman the movie 1 and 2, Superman, both the first two Christopher Reeves movies, to Die Hard movies, Jurassic Park, Terminator 1 and 2, Aliens, stuff like that. Stuff that I grew up watching way back. Indiana Jones, all of the original trilogy, stuff like that's what I come to mind when I think about my favorites. And so because I'm kind of known for talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, be like, how do you not have any of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in your top 10 favorites? Because it's not, they're movies that I really enjoy now, but they're not the movies that are my life. They're not
Hmm.
the ones that changed who I am. And it's those ones that I grew up with that just shaped my love of movies, that when I think favorites, I think of that. The ones
Hmm.
I've been watching for 30 years, not, I've been watching Infinity War for a year. Oh, it's one of my favorites. No, that's not, maybe 10, 20 years from now, I can put it in that category. And they're shocked. Like, what, The Dark Knight isn't in your top 10 favorites? Like, yeah, I mean, I really like The Dark Knight, but it's not these movies that I grew up with. So I have a hard time picking them as well. So I just got to throw out a bunch of them. Or the one I missed in there, Star Wars trilogy, the originals.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I usually One of my favorites is the movie Fantasia because
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of nostalgia from it growing up, and it really is a good piece of art. So
Right.
a lot of times I've just decided that I'm going to tell people that's my favorite. This is one of my favorites, and it encompasses so many things I love about movies. So I feel like it's an easy answer if I need a quick answer. But really, it's so hard to pick a favorite.
Right. Yeah. Some of that I hate picking favorites. And that's whenever I do live streams. That's what the go-to question. Hey, what's your favorite? This? What's your favorite? That? And I'm like, man, I don't know. There's so many good ones, or there's so many that are close together. It's tough.
Yeah, it's like you do the ranking videos. I've thought about doing them, and I've done a couple of those, but like I feel like my ranking lists shift and change too easily for me to do them.
And I just have to accept that. Mine do too. And so I just yesterday dropped my Pixar ranking, and like the bottom three are like were the same. But like I sat down and did it totally from scratch. Just had the list of movies. I rewatched almost all of them in the last couple of months, and just went through it and like, all right, where do they fall? And there's a few things that are locked in place, but everything in the middle, it shuffles.
Mm-hmm.
It shuffles a little bit. And I can have a tendency towards whatever I saw most recently to be a little bit too hard or too kind to it, whatever my immediate reaction to it. And I just kind of have to own that. And that's some of the fun of it. I try and in my rankings have the reality of the experience of watching it. Certain movies, you walk out of the theater, you're just so excited about it, and it ends on such a positive note, or it's so fun or lively and it evokes the right emotions that you can I can amp it up a little bit too much. And that's kind of the reality of it. You watch it a second time and you notice the problems that you kind of get knocked back a little bit. I've done a ton of that stuff, especially with my Marvel rankings, because they are such crowd pleaser type movies that whatever you just saw seems like, oh, I love that one too. Oh, I love that one too. And they all kind of evoke a similar fun vibe to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a little bit of first time bias with a lot of them because the jokes work better the first time with a big audience that are excited to see it. And so I tend to like, oh, oops, Thor Ragnarok's maybe a little bit too high up on my ranking. And I try not to lie about it. That's the reality of, doing that. But
I do the same thing. Like when I got out of Jurassic World, I said it was my favorite of the Jurassic Park movies. And then like a few months later, I was like, why did I say that?
Yeah, I done a ton of that stuff. That's and I think that's part of what can be appealing to normal people. Is when that's just a real thing to do. That's what normal people do. And I think that's a little bit of why I kind of resonate with some people is I have the same faults as them when it comes to movies. Like, I just got excited about a movie. Mm-hmm. And they like that. They want someone that's just as excited about seeing something new as they are, or just as excited about their childhood as they are. And that's what I want to be. When I first started, I think I was a little bit more tried to be the angry critic guy and do angry rants and stuff. And then I realized, like, those aren't the conversations I want to have in the comments. That's not the vibe I want to have. Mm-hmm. I do this because I love movies, so I'd much rather be the guy that seems to like too much stuff than be the guy or gets too excited about things than the guy that is cynical and negative. Like, it's not the vibe I want to be known for.
I feel like that kind of attitude does build an audience a little bit easier because so many people, like, hate watch things that they don't agree with.
Yeah.
But I don't really want that kind of an audience, so I'm fine with an audience quickly because I just don't want to do that. Like, I don't give a negative review unless I actually have something that I feel like is important to say about something that I feel negative about.
Exactly. Yeah. I've had a few times where I've done some of that stuff like, yeah, look, I got a bunch of people watching my thing and this is pretty cool. And then, when I didn't hate on something else, they're like, hey, why didn't we more negative? Like, I don't know what you're doing here. Like, I don't think I want that to be, and it's almost like that's the Twitter and YouTube stereotype is the toxicity and the angry fanboys and the people that just want to rile stuff up. And like, that's not what I want to be a part of. Like, touching on that sometimes can be fun and when it's real and it's authentic. But even like on my channel, the opinion that I'm most notorious for is I didn't like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 very much. And I talk about Marvel movies all the time. And so I have to talk negative about this movie that a lot of people loved. And I just don't even people think that like you hate. I've had people invite me onto their podcast to do like a love hate. You're the guy that hates Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and like I don't hate it. I just was disappointed by it. Like I don't want to be the guy known for hating that movie. I don't want to be the guy known for hating almost any movie. There's a few things I'd be okay being known for hating for, but they're things that I think are immoral or something like that. But Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I just didn't like it as much as some other people. I wish I did. Is that the angry mob stuff? I don't want to dive into that too much.
Yeah, there's too much of that online, and I don't want to add to it.
No. Mm-mm.
So I know you're most known for movie reviews, but do you have any favorite TV shows?
Even on my channel, the one that I'm kind of known for would be The Office. It's one of those shows that my wife and I discovered pre-kids, kind of for, honeymoon phase of the marriage. And specifically, the specific window where we discovered it was our apartment had been robbed. And so we moved real quickly out of the shady neighborhood. We moved into a bad neighborhood and moved somewhere else that was a little bit better. And we were only there real briefly before we were moving back to Texas. So there's this very specific transitional window of time. It had like a mattress on the floor where we slept. It was like very much early married phase type of story. And we went to go see Get Smart, which stars Steve Carell. And we're like, oh, we really enjoyed this guy. What has he done? Oh, he's got a TV show, The Office. Let's check it out. And in this window of time where we're sleeping on a floor in an apartment to escape getting robbed, we just discovered this show together that we've just kind of watched on loop ever since. For 11 years now, we've been watching seasons 1 through 4 of The Office on loop. So that's the one that kind of is nearest and dearest to my heart. Batman the Animated Series was a huge one that just grew up on, and then lost it for about 10 years because it went out of syndication or whatever, and then the Blu-ray set or DVD sets came out. I was like, oh, I should pick these up. Remember my childhood. Checked them out as an adult. And I was like, oh, wow, these really hold up. They're really good. And so then I've been able to show them to my son over the last few years and things like that. It's been really neat. Star Trek The Next Generation, or Star Trek the original and Star Trek The Next Generation, or some classic ones. So there's kind of a random smorgasbord of shows that I've checked out. But as of recently, TV's not as big of a deal because I just have to spend so much time watching movies to do my rankings. I don't rank things based off old memories of something. I actually rewatch them. And so, and I think that's one thing that might set some of my rankings apart is I really do try and rewatch things. So like I'm going to do a Conjuring ranking in a few days. So I'm rewatching all the Conjuring movies this week with my baby. That's great to, parenting right there. That's a demon possessed person. Can you say demon? I'm a great parent. I promise.
At least they're young enough they'll forget.
Yeah, she's very young. She's not talking or understanding or anything, so she's not actually watching them. But so I don't have as much time. So people are always like, hey, can you rank this TV show? Like, no, because I'd have to rewatch the whole thing. And like, hey, you've talked about liking Breaking Bad. Can you rank the seasons? I thought it was great, but that was 5 years ago. I have to rewatch 60 episodes or whatever to do that ranking. And that's 60 hours of my life to do one video that I don't know how well it'll do. So sorry, but probably not until something comes out. Like, but you did this TV show. Like, yeah, but I'm already watching The Office on loop. Like I'm already doing that. So it's much easier to do that. Or there's a couple of these superhero shows that have a little bit more crossover with movies that I do. But so anyway, that's a little bit of rabbit trail on TV shows and YouTube time together. Sorry.
Yeah, it's hard to do TV the same way you do movies because there's just so much more content to talk about.
Yeah.
Like when I was first starting my channel, I was like, it would be really fun to start Lost over again and then talk about every episode. And then as I got into like doing the movie, I was like, that would be way too much work.
Yeah. And what I've found about TV audiences is they're a lot more finicky because that's their show. Like for me, I did rankings the Arrow versus Arrow, Flash, and Supergirl, and it was one of those ones I did. Like I've always watched Flash and Arrow just from the beginning, and I did Supergirl just basically like, hey, I'm already watching these shows. I'll add another one in the mix. And pretty quickly, I was like, I don't think I'm going to do that again because I feel like an outsider joining someone's conversation. And they love this show, and they watch it week to week. And I did it as a homework assignment. And I don't feel good about that. I want to have a little bit more honesty in some of it. And they're even the shows that I do watch, like Flash and Arrow, they're way more like that's their thing. That's why they're watching videos about the Flash on YouTube. I'm not watching videos about the Flash on YouTube. I'm watching the Flash and talking about it. But they're like, they remember every detail and all these specific things that for a TV show, I can't do that. I can do that for the MCU. I can go in deep and have opinions on every hero and villain because a movie is such a different thing from a TV show. Like a movie's 2 hours. A season is 20 episodes. Whew, that's a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on my channel, I don't do all animated movies, but that's like a big chunk of what I talk about. So I'm just wondering what some of your favorite animated movies are. You could do Disney, Pixar, or if you have some obscure ones.
Yeah, so for me, I would go. I was born in the early 80s, so the first half of the Disney Renaissance, that's
Mm-hmm.
my childhood. And it just happened to, I look at them a little bit more, when I step back and try to be a little bit more objective, I had a great little window right there when my era of movies, from when I start remembering going to the theaters to when I kind of, for me, aged out a little bit of watching them before I kind of became more of a general movie lover. But, going into high school, I felt I aged out for a little bit there. But, I mean, it was Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King. That was like the stream of my prime. I was the target audience, and those were my movies. That's about as good of a stretch of animated movies as you got out there. And, Pixar's had some great runs too, but, those ones I always go back to. For same reasons I said before, that's my childhood. They're also great movies. And so I normally pick The Lion King as probably my favorite. And I have some actually as weird of a childhood, just if you're trying to understand my taste in movies, when Lion King came out, went to go see it at the drive-in theater, and there's 2 screens, and they're doing kind of like family side on one half and then adult stuff on the other half. And I don't remember what the 2 double features for each were, but the double feature that I saw, and this is so definitive of me, went and saw Lion King first section, and then I was just at the right age with it. My mom actually allowed me to go to the other side to go watch True Lies, the James Cameron, Arnold Schwarzenegger spy action movie, which that's like, I love James Cameron, I love Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then Lion King's my favorite animated movie. That's such if you're trying to have a picture of like, wow, how did that work out? That's so definitive to things that I like. 2 such opposites. But right at that window of my middle school age years that I could love The Lion King, and my mom would say, yeah, you can go watch Arnold Schwarzenegger go shoot people in the face and Jamie Lee Curtis dance in her underwear. Like right at that age window right there that I could have that experience.
Okay. Do you have any, maybe not growing up, but like maybe now, do you have any maybe more recent ones that you enjoy, or maybe some obscure ones that you've seen that you really like?
So more recent, it's as obvious of an answer, but the Pixar stuff I think has been just really good. And so like I didn't see Finding Nemo until my son was born. So like 10 years after it came out, and the movie, on a surface level, it's about like trying to find Nemo. It's all about Nemo. It's really about Marlin and him as a parent and learning to parent. And so then seeing it for the first time as a parent, as I like have this new, he was I think 1 year old at the time we actually watched it with, and it kind of hit me pretty differently because of that. Same reason that I really resonated with Toy Story 4, because I think some of the themes shift towards from friendship to kind of almost a parenting of like this letting go sort of idea. It hit me a little bit differently than some of the other ones. And so those are some of the like obvious answers of Pixar's as non-obscure as you can get going with Pixar. I don't know, that's where we started with. I don't remember if I had any good obscure ones. I wouldn't necessarily call these obscure, but I guess in their own way they are. But growing up, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm.
Oh, yeah.
Batman the Animated Series, I touched on it before. I think it's the best animated TV show of all time. In the middle of its run, they did a theatrical film. And some people forget it was theatrical because it wasn't successful at the theater, but it was theatrically released. And I actually was one of the 10 people. My sister and I were 20% of the people that actually saw Batman Mask of the Phantasm in the theater.
Oh, wow.
And so it's just a neat little Batman story. It touches on the origin story before Batman Begins did that, and has a new villain that's barely been used even anywhere else, even inside of its own universe. Mm-hmm. And so I just think it's a really well done film and a great interpretation of Batman and well done. And then also not all that obscure, but it's less obscure than the mainline Disney stuff. But then a Goofy movie was one that I went to go see when it came out in the theater. had fun with it, kind of forgot about it, got married, and then found out it's like, my wife's favorite movies and loves the soundtrack. So she had the disc and everything. And then, is it Power Trip, I think is the name of the band. And so, that I've heard that one on repeat quite a bit as an adult, even more so than when it first came out. And then they had a shirt at Target of the tour shirt for the band in a Goofy movie, and my wife has that shirt and wears it around the house all the time and things like that. I need to wear that one in my video sometime. That needs to make an appearance.
Yeah, I found a shirt with Powerline. I think it's Powerline, the group.
Powerline, yeah. Powerline, yeah.
I found a shirt of him at Walmart last year, and I bought one.
Perhaps we even have the same shirt. That might be where we picked up ours as well. So, yeah, I probably don't have any too super duper obscure ones.
Okay, that's fine. That's why they're called obscure. Not that many people have seen a lot of the ones that I'm probably thinking of.
I mean, if like in my childhood, some of the stuff that I remember that I haven't watched more recently, but like The Last Unicorn, I remember scaring. Mm-hmm. What is that thing? This big red bull thing. And then that's another one that I get married to discover that it's like one of my wife's favorites. And once again, she had the soundtrack. I guess America the band did the soundtrack for it. And then the Secret of Nim was another one, a little bit creepy side that grew up watching. And then The Land Before Time have some distinct. Watch the land. Excuse me, did I say Land Before Time? I meant that was one too. That one was the one that traumatized me. Other people say Bambi. Land Before Time. Seeing that one the first time and like, what?
Land Before Time actually shows the dead mother. Bambi never did.
And that's when I married my wife. She's like, I'll never watch it. I watched it all the time as a child. I'm still depressed because of my childhood rewatching that one too much. The one with the mouse that travels to America. An
American Tale.
Bible. American Tale. That's one that I have very distinct memories of because apparently my dad had a wild bonkers 40th birthday party at our house. And they're like, we got to get the kids out of here. This is getting too wild. So they sent us across the street to watch that for the first time across the street. And then we're like, we can't wait to watch this movie. And all sorts of crazy debauchery was going on at my home, apparently, that I didn't find out about until 15 years later.
Well, it's probably for the best.
Yeah, this one was weird too. This is a very weird sort of like, oh no, my family, or what is wrong with my family? That is bizarre. That sort of stuff. But I watched, Fievel and his adventures.
So moving away from movies and that kind of stuff a little bit for now, do you have any favorite books or book series?
Not as much. I don't really enjoy the length of fiction. What I enjoy about movies is that it's in 2 hours. I can have a complete story. And so I've never been one that's drifted towards fiction in that regards. But I really enjoyed the book of Ready Player One. Once again, because it's self-contained, but like a whole book series of things would probably be too much for me. But being that Ready Player One touched on all 80s nostalgia stuff, like I'm the target demographic to be like, oh, I caught that reference. Oh, I knew what you were talking about. They're all designed for someone like me. That's one more recently, but I go through a lot of nonfiction stuff. Last year, I listened to or read over 60 nonfiction books. Really enjoy a lot of the stuff from Malcolm Gladwell. I've enjoyed his stuff. He's got a new one coming out actually in a few months. Things like that. I listen to boring marketing, business, self-development, sociology type things. That's normally, if I'm going to do a story, movie, TV, if I want to like enhance my brain or like think about how to do things better, then I go for books.
That's kind of funny. I have several interviews set up in the small window of time that I'm back home on a daytime schedule because I work overnights. And the one I did yesterday with Chelsea Robson, she basically said the exact same thing. she reads like self-help and business type.
Well, I'm good. I'm not alone in the universe.
Then do you have any favorite musicians or maybe favorite genre of music?
Not really. Well, it's the same thing as we talked about before about picking favorites. Like you think, what's your favorite of music? Like, there's so much. And especially I think with music, artists, they tend to have like a window where they're great and then they they lose it as they get
Mhm.
older. So, I mean, I was as massive of a Weezer fan from, I don't know, 1998 until 2005 as anyone. And I haven't even listened to any of their recent albums. Like I'll listen to something like, okay, it's kind of more of the same thing, except the guy's 50 years old. Like this, it's kind of weird at a certain point in time. Like, oh, you're still singing about puppy love, even though you've been married for 10 years. And like, I use Apple Music, and it gives me playlists. It tells me what to listen to and cycles through some stuff. And so it's mostly rock music from like 1993 until about 2004. A bunch of stuff in there, or 80s. All kinds of 80s stuff. That tends to be the stuff that I listen to. But and then just because of my church world background, a lot of worship artists from different churches. I listened to a lot of that over the years. So yeah.
Okay. And then you already touched about this a little bit earlier. Your favorite shows growing up, you talked about Batman the Animated Series, some of the movies you grew up with. Do you have any that stick out besides them, or was those the ones?
Let's see, other things kind of growing up that I so like Animaniacs was
Oh
a
yeah.
huge one. And it's like one of these ones you go back and you watch it now, it's like, wow, this is crazy. This is made for kids back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I had a great little window. There was a bunch of whether you're talking Disney Renaissance, and then things like Animaniacs, Batman the Animated Series. Those are like, I was a fifth grader during all of that stuff. X-Men the Animated Series was another one. Like X-Men the Animated Series did season-long story arcs, serialized storytelling, I don't know, 10 years before everyone else was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing these complex comic book character story arcs for people my age. And sometimes they're like way oversimplifying it to squeeze it into 20 minutes or whatever their time limit was. But like, Dark Phoenix, the movie came out recently, and that's kind of, I sparked me to, I bought a couple of the seasons off of Vudu right after I literally got home from watching Dark Phoenix, went home, bought a season or two of X-Men the Animated Series. And they did the Phoenix Saga in 5 episodes, and then they come back and they do 5 episodes on the Dark Phoenix Saga on this children's cartoon 25 years ago. Like, and I rewatching through some of the stuff, I was like, I actually remember this. Like, wow, and I must have watched this thing constantly because I was remembering the cliffhangers, I was remembering the lines as they transitioned and all of it. And so those are some that kind of come to mind.
Yeah, I need to find myself a copy of that X-Men show. I don't think I was allowed to watch that when I was a kid because I vaguely remember it, but I never watched it.
Yeah.
And people keep telling me about it and telling me how good it was and how much better they did the Dark Phoenix Saga. So I really need to find myself a copy and watch that.
It's an interesting experience because on the one hand, it's a 25-year-old cartoon for television. On the and that's other, and they're doing these over here. On the other hand, they're doing these complex story arcs, and they're putting them in these just direct translations to a TV show, and so it can feel like they're moving really quickly, and there's things that are stiff about it, and at the same time, you're like, I can't believe they made this. I can't believe they greenlit this. Like, wow, like they actually trusted that kids would be able to like stick around for their show and they'd come back and rewatch it. And they trusted that even though there was no way to watch older episodes, which is why they didn't do a lot of serialized stuff until now, because if you're doing serialized storytelling on Saturday mornings, someone starts watching at episode 8, they can't see the build up to that one for 4 months, and they don't even know when it'll be, and they don't even know what they're looking for. And they trusted that. They went with it. And I mean, I don't know if it worked for everyone, but I know for me and my friends, that's what we were watching every Saturday. And we had all the X-Men figures. And I actually I had all the cards too. Yeah. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm pulling out this old booklet of cards that I have from when I was a childhood. And I mean, it's just all the, Marvel characters and stuff that we like would watch X-Men. And then we would pull out our cards and start trading and playing games making up games and stuff. That's what we did. And anyway, I don't know where that story was going, but yes, you should check it out. I don't know if you use Vudu, but it's on Vudu.
Okay. And then similar to that, what is the first movie you remember seeing in theaters?
It's a 3-part answer. I have 3 different degrees, stories of that answer. It's not clear cut. All of them, same sort of window of time, 88, 89. So I think technical first one I have vaguest of memories, but it's more so of I've been told, or like I kind of remember it is, and I kind of been told things, which was Oliver and Company. So I believe that's the Disney movie right before the Renaissance kicked in.
Yeah.
And so that one, I think that's the first one they took me to. I think that's the technical right answer. Then you get to 1989, back to our little booklet here. Once again, I pulled the booklet of cards out for those on the podcast. Batman 89 is the first event film that I was excited for. There was this defining thing in my childhood of, I had all the toys, had an almost complete collection of the cards. You can see the one that I don't have right there. And I wonder which one that is. I need to look into that. Maybe I can finally, after 30 years, have a complete collection of my Batman cards. So I remember that one as the event, but I don't remember going to the theater. So I have distinct memories of the actual release of the film, but not going to the theater. Same summer, same maybe month, the year before, my family had moved from California to Texas. And for our summer trip, my mom's sister and I took a road trip back to California. And on our way out to California, we stopped in New Mexico in some small town with just one theater and one screen at the theater. And they're showing Star Trek V. And classic, wonderful classic, one of the best Star Trek movies if you have terrible taste in movies. So we show up at this theater. It's the only movie they're showing. We buy tickets, and they say, but if we don't sell 20 tickets, then we don't show the movie. And so we sit down and we're like counting every person that walks in. And this theater actually had a balcony. It was one of a balcony theaters. So it was this bizarre thing of small town New Mexico, this theater with one screen with a balcony in it. And we're literally like walking to the front of the screen to like, is anyone up in the balcony looking around? And so Star Trek V is my first memory. And luckily 20 people did buy tickets. So we got to see the event that is Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
I'm glad that I'm meeting someone else who has a multi-part answer to that question, because I feel like I'm the only person who does have, because I also have a multi-part answer. My technically first movie that I saw was the remake of Miracle on 34th Street. Okay. But I was so young that I don't really remember it. I just know that my aunt took a bunch of us at Christmas time. And then my family didn't go to movies until I was a teenager. So the first movie that I really remember going to see was The Princess Diaries. Okay. Because that came out, and I'm not really sure why, but like, I'm from a family of all boys, but we saw these commercials. We thought it looked hilarious. And we had a family friend who watched us a lot when we were kids. And somehow she convinced our parents to take us. And then that was the first movie. And like, we went at least once a year after that. And then it just kind of built up from there and went like every time a Disney movie was released, then we went to a Disney movie. But yeah. Miracle on 34th Street and The Princess Diaries both are kind of my answer. I never meet anybody else who has more than one answer. Everybody's always like, yeah, my first one was this.
Yeah. That's where whenever I started doing this, people started asking me that question. I was like, like, okay, these are the three event things, but it's not, it's like this, it's this mush, which is a lot of memories tend to be kind of mushy type things like that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how do all these pieces fit together? And so those are like the three ones that it's like, yeah. And as the universe played out, I just happened to have the notebook still that kind of, even I have visuals when trying to explain my 3-part answer to what the first movie I saw was.
And then I threw in a couple more questions that I don't really ask anybody else, but I know you're into superheroes. Okay. So I was wondering what your favorite superhero is, and then what is your favorite superhero film?
Okay. So I go with a 2-part answer on this one. We got visuals again. I go with both Superman and Batman. And I think they're kind of like the archetypes of superheroes in their own ways, which one being the person who's just a person born of tragedy who uses tragedy to do something. And that's in its own way this very interesting story about what if someone was so broken by their childhood that they dedicate their life to making it so no one else has that same or to stop as many people as possible from having the same pain that they had. That's interesting to me. And then Superman is the opposite one of, well, I guess there is tragedy in his backstory, but what if you have an all-powerful person that can do whatever they want, but they're raised by people with good values? And so they take a person that could be the tyrant that destroys the earth, and he's raised just to be a good old-fashioned aw shucks Boy Scout. That's kind of interesting. And then you take those two people and you put them as, in the same universe interacting with each other, and you have this guy that's very dark background leading to him to, pummel guys in the dark and using fear. And then you have a guy that has all the power in the world and uses it to be a symbol of hope. Those are two very different worldviews. It's very interesting dynamics to put on screen together that, it would have been nice if, when they were put in a film battling each other, that it could have been about their different worldviews, and Superman could have been, optimistic and not cynical, depressing. I think you're missing the point of what's fun about Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
It's not this.
Yeah, I think they're my favorite superheroes too, but at least for Superman, I feel like I still have yet to see a Superman movie really nail it. I mean, Christopher Reeve nailed the character, but I wasn't too excited about the writing. It just, there was a lot of plot holes and weird stuff.
And I grew up with those ones, so I'll defend them till I'm red in the face, but I get it. I mean, I totally understand why people that if that's not your childhood, there's some holes. There's some issues here. And it's an outdated version of Superman, or more importantly, outdated version of the world around him. When the Lex Luthor is like, I'm evil. I'm going to blow up California to turn it into I'm going to buy real estate by blowing up half of California and sending it off. What? Come on. It's like this ridiculous. If you watch it now, it's just ludicrous. But that's who the character was and who Lex Luthor was. And then they did a big revamp in, I think, 86 with the Man of Steel storyline. And that's where Lex Luthor became the person that we think of him now as kind of, this business person that's scared of aliens. So he's doing nefarious things, but he's kind of like evil Bruce Wayne is kind of what he is. And that's a much more interesting character. And so, as great of an actor as Gene Hackman is, he's doing this goofy guy that's wearing wigs and stuff. Whereas, even Smallville, the TV shows, Lex Luthor is much more compelling with Michael Rosenbaum than, goofy real estate plan Lex Luthor. But yeah.
I think part of my problem with this, like all Superman movies, is I grew up with Superman the animated series.
Yep.
And to me, that's still the definitive Superman.
Yep.
And none of the movies.
Batman the animated series, I would say, is the definitive Batman.
Yeah. None of the movies feel like they're nailing that version of the character, and I think that's what I'm looking for.
Right. Exactly. I feel like WB as a company is afraid of doing a straightforward interpretation of their characters. And one of the reasons Marvel's been a little bit more successful is that there's twists and turns and there's plot changes, but they're giving you like a fairly straightforward version of what you want from the character, and so they're easy to enjoy. But with you look at WB going back, even Nolan, like, let's do Batman, but he's in a pocket universe. We want to do it grounded. Well, that's like a twist on it. That's not classic Batman. That's Nolan Batman. It's its own thing. And a lot of people don't really accept that about it, but it is. It's its own thing. And then, all right, let's do Superman. This character that stands for hope. Who should we get? What about like the most cynical comic booky director out there we have? Zack Snyder. And I love Zack Snyder's work, but he's a weird fit for Superman. Because he's the opposite. He makes more sense as a Batman director, but he has a cynical worldview. He did Watchmen, a deconstruction of superheroes as his test ground to do Man of Steel, and they're opposites. They're and so it's just a weird thing that they did, and it's like doing let's do the spin on the whole thing, and then they give us Batman, and again it's like, let's put machine guns, and he's older and he's angry and he's branding people. Or what you could do is you could just do like a straightforward version of it. You don't need to make Superman interesting. Superman is interesting to Superman fans because he's Superman. So just do Superman.
Yeah.
WB, driving me crazy.
I feel like with Zack Snyder, I hadn't really seen many of his movies, when they announced he was going to do Man of Steel, but I had seen Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole, and I loved that movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I was so excited that he was going to be the one doing Superman. And then I watched it. I was like, this is not as good as the Owl movie.
It's like, I mean, if you look at what he did before that, it's he does Dawn of the Dead, a zombie movie, like, and it's like a zombie movie with a downer ending. Like it's like, and if you like that kind of thing, I love it because I love that kind of thing. Very opposite worldview from Superman. Then he does 300, like as like gritty macho guys pummeling each other, violent. Once again, dark ending to it. Very different. Then he does Watchmen, that's like dark, gritty, cynical, deconstruction. Then he does the Owl movie. Like, and inside of his filmography, Owl movie is like, what?
Yeah.
Where did this come from? And then he does Superman, and it's like, what? What? Of all the people that you could get, what? I don't understand why you would pick the guy that just his worldview does not match Superman. The thing that he's great at is the opposite of Superman.
Yeah. I don't know. Some days maybe they'll get it right, but
yeah. Well, and I guess as a final thought, so people ask me all the time, are you a Marvel or a DC guy? It's like, well, you can mean a couple different things there. If you're talking about raw characters, DC. If you're talking about their TV shows from the 90s, Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, even Batman Beyond, Justice League, they win.
Yes.
Though Marvel had the Marvel stuff was pretty good there too. With, like I said, X-Men. Then there's a Spider-Man cartoon that's also was really good. But they're not the Bruce Timm stuff. You're talking about the movies the last 10 years. I mean, there's not a competition. Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is playing a different game, and they're winning across the board.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Like, for years, I would always say that my favorites were the DC heroes. But, like, Marvel makes really good movies, and DC just, they have not been making what I wanted to see. So it's a hard question to answer, because on the one hand, I love the characters of DC. On the other hand, the Marvel movies are way better than what DC has been doing. So,
and I think the part about that that's so crazy to me is that they've got the best source material. And Marvel is taking Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're making a movie that I'm loving out of it. They're like when they announced Iron Man, my wife didn't even know who Iron Man was. And then they're turning someone as kind of a weird of as a character as Thor and making him blockbusters out of it. Like, they're taking weaker source material and just making very enjoyable films. And of course, the thing that they're most famous for is they've just cracked the code of tying it all together as the comic books are.
Yeah, they're just killing it. I'm kind of glad that at least at the beginning they didn't have access to their most famous characters. Because it kind of forced them to work with what they had. Yeah. And they did such great movies out of that.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, for me, I still think that the original Iron Man is one of their best films for me. Just you kind of take away all the pretense and all the world building of the later ones, and you just kind of have a movie that's just a lot of fun. And you look at it on paper and you go, okay, you got the guy that was fired from Ally McBeal because he was doing drugs and went to jail, and it's from the director of Elf, and it's maybe a B-level Marvel character. What are you thinking? How is this going to work? And they just made a good movie that had characters that you liked, an astounding lead performance. It moves at a nice pace. It's funny. It's clever. It's witty. And they just set that template that they've been able to, like, just do that with all these characters. And for whatever reason, WB, I don't know what they're doing. I just don't get it at all.
Yeah. I still hope that one day they'll figure things out and get it right.
Yep. I would love that more than anyone, as they're my favorites. Yeah. But man, at the path they're on and the choices they're making, I just don't get it. Because even the projects they're announcing, like, we're not really looking to move forward with Man of Steel 2, but we might do Supergirl. Like, there's a Supergirl TV show, and like Henry Cavill's like been sitting there for years waiting for a sequel, and it's like, I just don't even understand what you're doing. And like, let's do Birds of Prey, and something more.
I'm not sure they understand what they're doing.
No, yeah, like,
honest.
When I was like, so the first January I was doing my channel. So I've been doing my channel about 6 months. That first January, I decided that I was going to do daily movie news, just to experiment, to try something different. So every day I'd get off work and I would just real quick, whatever the movie news was, do a video real quick about that story. And the what turned out to be the big joke of that month was every single week there would be 2 or 3 different stories about what the DC was doing. And it was like this insane thing of like, in this 1 month, they're announcing a Dick Grayson movie. They're doing Green Lantern. Ben Affleck is directing. Ben Affleck is not directing. Ben Affleck is writing. Ben Affleck is not writing. And they just kept announcing all these. They're going to do Birds of Prey. They're going to do a Joker standalone movie. They're doing Suicide Squad 2. And they just kept announcing Nightwing the movie and just throwing every single week multiple different projects out there. And you're like, I can't believe this is WB. This studio's 100 years old or whatever. How is all this getting leaked? How are they proposing all these ideas? There's no chance that these movies are going to happen. Some of them will, but like, what is going on? How is this so out of control? Why are there so many leaks? Why are some of these terrible ideas being spread? Like, what is happening? And it's not much better 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
We still don't really know what they're doing. And they've had some hits in the time. They've had some big flops. And it seems like all of their safest bets, they've totally dropped the ball on. Like a Justice League movie. How do you screw that up? But they did. And then like Aquaman, that one made over $1 billion. Like what? I don't even understand what's happening.
Yeah. It feels like they're just throwing all sorts of things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, very much so. And they can't even learn the right lessons from what is and isn't sticking. They're throwing things at the wall and then throwing things up at the different wall.
Oh, well, we just have to sit back and watch what happens, I guess.
Fingers crossed they get it.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all my questions for the Q&A. I guess we could transition into talking about Elf now.
Okay.
So in December, I do a series where I talk about all the different versions of A Christmas Carol. So I wanted a different way to talk about Christmas movies, so I decided to do Christmas in July because that's sort of a thing. And this year I thought I would ask different guests to choose movies. So you chose Elf.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what Elf is and why you chose it?
Absolutely. So Elf, you've probably seen it since it's not exactly an obscure film. But so at the time it came out, Will Ferrell hadn't quite become the A-list movie star guy yet. He'd done some starring stuff. He had been in movies, but like Old School, and he, of course, had done Saturday Night Live. But he wasn't the guy that you think of, Will Ferrell, that you think of now. And then the movie was directed by Jon Favreau, who now Jon Favreau is always doing Jungle Book. He did a couple. He's very much known for his work with Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he's got Lion King coming out, and so he's known for a bunch of things now. At the time, he was not this kind of proven commodity. The Elf was one of the movies that made that happen, and then it's I guess is it. I don't think it's based on a book. They do the book stuff at the end, but I don't know if that was they were trying to sell books or if I'm
not sure. I've never seen a book. Yeah, but that doesn't mean there isn't one.
And so that might just be my brain even said that because the movie ends with them writing a book that probably doesn't even exist. But and so it's this original property, and they just kind of put out this trailer that just seemed like such a fun idea and clever and charming. And when it came out, I would have been in my early 20s, and so I was in a pretty. I'm in a grown-up phase of my life, so listening to very loud, obnoxious music, watching lots of indie, obscure things, just like, hey, I'm a grown-up now. I don't just watch that stuff everyone else watches. And, this is around the same time that, Finding Nemo came out. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't watch Finding Nemo until 10 years after it came out, because I'm not going to watch that. I'm a grown-up. I don't watch kids' movies. And then I saw this trailer for Elf, and I was like, that just looks delightful. And so even in the middle of my hardened, I'm an adult phase, went off to go see it with a group of my friends, And I just think it's one of the funniest family movies, funniest Christmas movies kind of ever put out there that still makes me laugh 15 years later. And I can watch it with my 5-year-old, my 7-year-old, or, going back 2 years ago when they were 3 and 5, and they would be laughing at the same things I was laughing at as a guy in my mid-30s, even though I'd been watching the movie since 10 years before they were born. And that's great family entertainment. And so much of it is quotable. There's things that you can say and everyone knows what you're talking about. There's a bunch of sight gags in it that you can't really quote, but if I was there and I had some spaghetti and I started pouring syrup on top of it, candy, people would be like, oh, you're like an elf. Like all these things about it that everybody remembers. It's just so sweet. It's so friendly and happy. And just every time it makes me laugh.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when it came out. I know I was a teenager and I saw it. We borrowed it from the library. I did not like it when I watched it, and I hadn't seen it since.
What?
Maybe I was just a teenager and thought it was just something stupid for kids, but I did not remember liking it. I remember thinking it was obnoxious. And like every time I hear people talking about it, I'm like, why do people like this movie so much? I remember it being such a dumb movie. So when you suggested watching it, I was like, yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to watch it again, like 10 years later, however long ago it was, 15, I guess, closer to. And then I watched it yesterday, and I was like, this is way better than I remember it being. This is like actually a good movie. And I don't know what I thought I watched, but it wasn't what this. Like there was still some stuff that was like kind of obnoxious, like the eating and the chugging soda and belching, and like, it's kind of obnoxious in parts, but like the rest of it is like really sweet and funny. And that now I'm finding there's a ton of people in this movie that I recognize that I didn't back then. Like Ed Asner is Santa, Bob Newhart is his elf father. And then I was obsessed while it was on with The Last Man on Earth. So Mary Steenburgen is his father's wife. Zooey Deschanel as the love interest. Peter Dinklage as this children's author, and Amy Sedaris as Deb. There's so many people in this movie that I had no idea were in this movie.
Right, and it's both directions, because we talked about Bob Newhart's of like Ed Asner's of classics, or it's like one of the movies that put Zooey Deschanel on the map. So it's easy to forget she's in it because she didn't quite have the personality that she's kind of been known for. It's not as much in this movie, and then her hair's a different color. And so it's easy to forget, like, oh yeah, like she's like this major part of this movie. But sometimes like I'll even forget that. Like I absolutely know that information. Then I'm watching it. It's like, oh yeah, it's the same person. But yeah, it's one of those movies that's just jam packed with people, or of course, like Peter Dinklage at the time, this is before Game of Thrones and so many other things. And so this is one of the movies that did put him on the map as like this great, funny guy.
Yeah, there were so many surprises in this movie. Like one of the biggest things that kind of surprised me at the beginning was how much work they put into like the special effects, and there was like stop motion animation. And like, since he's a human and there's elves, I was looking at like the different scenes of like, are they using like Lord of the Rings style
forced
tricks
forced perspective and everything?
Yeah, it was like, I was really surprised at how much stuff in there was to notice.
When you're watching the stuff where he's sitting in Bob Newhart's lap and things like that, like, what am I looking at right now?
Yeah. All that I was just trying to figure out exactly how they were doing all these different things. Yeah, it was a completely different experience watching it now than when I was younger.
Yeah. And it's just one of those ones that I think also, maybe even time back to some of the things I said before about there's something a little bit infectious about being positive rather than cynical. And so then you have Buddy the Elf as this obnoxiously positive person. And you talk about a Christmas movie that's all about this guy that just loves Santa and Christmas to an insane level. And it's just, there's an infectiousness to that, which is even the part of the plot line of the movie going into the third act of trying to pass along the Christmas cheer to everybody. And that's kind of nice. Especially, one of the tying back to the Zack Snyder type stuff of one of the things about the 21st century is everyone wants to deconstruct everything and have kind of this other take on it, the dark spin and things like that. Whereas this movie, it's like, no. We're just going to be good old-fashioned, sappy fun. And let's just lean hard into optimism and the Christmas joy and spirit.
Yeah, there have been so many movies recently where they're trying to make seems like the next classic Christmas movie. And I'd always heard people say that Elf was like the last time they really got that right. And I would always think, really? It was? And now I'm watching it and I was like, yeah, it kind of was.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think there's new ones that come out every year, but they're always just kind of like, okay, that happened. Trying to even remember and they're not even memorable. I guess that's even kind of the point of like, yeah, where'd all they go? All of them go.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk bad about this, especially since this is Rachel's bread and butter, but Hallmark movies, the Hallmark Christmas stuff, they're I've watched some of them and I've watched some to review with her, but they just don't have what the classic Christmas movies that everybody remembers has. And I'm not sure what else they need, but it just doesn't feel like they have the memorability and the characters that you really connect with. I don't know. I mean,
right.
They're doing something right because they have a massive audience, but they just don't feel like even Elf feels.
Right.
I don't know exactly what to say about them. It's different.
Right. Well, it's an interesting phenomena to me because I don't even understand the business model of how many they put out and how do you even do that? And it seems like the goal is it's quantity over let's do one that really pops and has something to say or something that's unique about it. Because you even think Elf, there's a concept that you can, describe in a sentence. Like, what if a human got confused as an elf, was raised as an elf, only to discover he's a human, and then he goes back to civilization as an elf? You can kind of go, oh, that's kind of funny. That's kind of amusing. And then you add to that, hey, what if the North Pole aesthetics were like all of those classic Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Jack Frost. Let's do that stop motion aesthetic of those. So you go, oh, that's kind of fun. That's a neat idea. And then you can immediately pitch it in a way that is interesting. Whereas it just seems that's not what you feel like you get from the Hallmark ones. It's much more just standard.
Kind of cookie cutter.
Yeah, cookie cutter, assembly line.
It feels like they're maybe not completely recycling the plot, but it feels like they're making similar movies and then just hoping that one or two rise to the top and become better than the rest. I don't know, because I always hear the fans of Hallmark talking about specific movies, and it's always just the same handful, but they make 30 to 40 of them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And like I said, I don't want to talk down about them because that's Rachel's thing. She loves these things, and I'm definitely not watching them, so I don't feel like I have any right to totally criticize all of them. It's just they just don't feel like the classic Christmas movie.
Well, even to kind of go with one from last year, they did the Grinch for Illumination. And I didn't end up seeing it in the theater. We went to go see it. We took the whole family opening night. And then I guess there a car crashed into the power lines or something, and a transformer exploded. And so we got 10 minutes into the movie, and then it's actually almost a little bit scary the way it played out because there was a guy standing in the dark right by the entrance staring at us. And I was like, am I about to be shot? I remember, I've heard the stories. This guy just standing there, and then the screen get 10 minutes in, and the guy walked in front of us. The lights turned on. He goes, "We are shutting down the theater. All of you need to go. We will give you refunds for whatever you purchased. We will give you, coupons. But the transformer blew up down the road, and the power company, and this whole long story. Okay, well, that was weird, and we never ended up seeing it. And so we rented it, watched it at home." Just to give the backstory to this Christmas little rant. But finally watched it at home, and it's a movie that I didn't think had any Christmas spirit. It has the Illumination spirit, which is to say there's pop music and there's some lowbrow humor and things like that, but it just wasn't any like fall in love with Christmas vibe to it. It was just kind of the Illumination formula is what it felt like to me. Like, let's squeeze Dr. Seuss into Illumination rather than let's try and do Dr. Seuss right with the Christmas spirit.
I think I had similar feelings. I don't think I thought to put it in that exact way, but it didn't feel like I thought it was going to feel, because I was expecting it to be a lot better than it was. Like, it wasn't a bad movie. It wasn't something that really was going to stick with you. Something that I was going to revisit in the future. Right.
It was just, you watch it, and I was like, I don't hate this. This isn't like, oh, they've embarrassed themselves. What have they done? It's just they took a story that's classic, distinct flavor with the Dr. Seussisms, as well as this Christmas classic. So it's both classic from two different parts, and then it just felt like everything else. And that's kind of where it's like, it's just, this is good, but it's just like everything else, especially from Illumination.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about just some of your favorite scenes from Elf?
Yeah, we could head in that direction. Yeah.
The ones that stick with you and make it a classic, I guess.
All right. So what sticks to me about Elf and the classics? I mean, I think kind of what I touched on before and what you touched on before of the aesthetics that they created in the first act in the North Pole, even the sense of humor, the storytelling side to it of, when you're an elf, there's only a couple of jobs you can have, and one of them's baking cookies in a tree, which is not a good idea. Like, just these little jokes like that. It's like, that's a little, just a clever joke that when you think elf and you're thinking your mind's in one direction, and then start talking about the cookies you had as a kid, you're like, that's funny. That's a legitimately funny joke. And with Bob saying it just works. So it's just such a funny thing to say. And then you have this overly optimistic, but Will Ferrell playing clueless as he does so well, but without the raunch. Like, it's like a good-hearted version of Will Ferrell in the Clueless around elves who it just works nicely, and just it's interesting to look at because of the forced perspective stuff and then the stop motion stuff. And so it just hits really nicely. And then you go from that to the fish out of water, and they just kind of found all the right scenarios to kind of do a little bit of observational humor about the Christmas spirit in modern times and how we take some of the stuff for granted and the silliness of it. And what if this naive elf guy shows up at a store and we're like, and Santa's coming. It's really funny to see a 40-year-old man in tights screaming about Santa coming and getting more excited than anyone else, and then feeling betrayed when it's not actually Santa. You sit on a throne of lies. Like just this guy that's always optimistic and energetic, positive about everything, until it's like, this is not Santa. And then likewise, when you move into the Peter Dinklage parts of it later in the film, and he's making all of these stereotypical jokes about elves or little people to a guy, and he's saying them deadpan and dead serious, and like taking these jokes that are so stale in most contexts, and then you have Buddy the Elf saying them to Peter Dinklage in this context, and you're like, that's just a really funny thing. It's just the way the placement of these jokes just kind of works pretty well. So yeah, those are the ones that just kind of come to mind of like what they did with Buddy the Elf and what they did with Will Ferrell's specific strengths, and not going raunchy, not going adult. It just works.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things I liked a lot about it was everyone's reactions to Buddy, because there were so many people around him that were like really serious or deadpan, playing it really straight, and then he's ridiculous, and I really like that.
Well, every time he does the singing gram for his dad, of like, he shows up, doesn't know what a singing gram is, like, all right, you sing him a song, tell him what you're up to. Like, he's like, I'm your son, and this one, and he's like, okay, that was weird.
Yeah.
Okay, that was weird.
I feel like this, I don't know if this is the right analogy or not, but like a couple months ago, Rachel was doing Muppet May, and she said that Muppet movies basically they have a plot, but at the same time they don't. It's just a basic plot, and then there's a lot of things that happen within the basic plot. And I felt like
Yeah.
this was kind of like that, because you have the basic framework of this weird elf man trying to find his father, but then you have all these weird little scenes that don't really add to the main plot, and it's just
Yeah.
hilarious things that are happening.
Well, even if you go into like the main plot of the third act, it's Santa's sleigh crashes. Like, we haven't even talked about that. It's like, who cares? Like, Santa's sleigh crashes. Like, it gives us like something to tie all together in the third act and kind of, like give us something to end on. But like, yeah, it's all about the adventure of it all. Like, this set of characters, this person, how people interact with them. It's it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's a very random movie, but it's random in a way that everything works together so well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I can't believe that all these years I thought this was a terrible movie, and now that I'm watching it, I find out it's actually really good.
That's interesting, the way that like life works out that way. The context under which you watch something,
Yeah.
or either gives you this very positive spin on it or very negative spin on it, and you maybe have to re-explore some things, certain points in time, to like go, okay, that was better than I thought, or oh, that wasn't nearly as good as I thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's probably all I've got. We've been talking for like an hour and a half, so I suppose I probably better let you go. You said you had a couple hours before you had to get your kids, so.
Yeah. I'm off to the movies in a couple hours, and then I picked the kid up afterwards. So it's like I worked in this one with, like, to be able to keep doing videos for my channel, I had to get a baby, like find grandma to watch the kids so I could do some stuff like this, and then I had to go to the movies, and then hopefully the baby, when I pick her up, will be tired so I can go home and put her to sleep, and then while she's sleeping at like midnight, shoot a video, edit it at 2 a.m, something like that.
Okay.
So it's and then the exciting one is then the next. I've got 2 days in a row of that. So this one's Conjuring. So that's okay. That's new movie. Got to do that. But tomorrow it's a babysitter, so I can go see the new Spider-Man movie, and that's the one I'll definitely be up till 4 a.m. making my review, and hopefully baby's sleeping.
Okay. Well, I probably better let you go then. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you should they want to see more of your videos and such?
Absolutely. Just if you search for Sean Chandler Talks About, SCAN, Sean Chandler on YouTube, you'll either find a NFL football player or me. The one that looks like me is me. And he's talking about movies, not playing football. The one that's talks, that's the one. And if you enjoy big franchises, that's probably my big thing, is just any of the big franchises, I rank them, talk about them. And whatever people are talking about with movies, that's the type of content I want to join the conversation and put my thoughts out there, and have a hopefully positive conversation where we can respect each other's opinions on movies. That's what I try to do.
Okay. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
If you ever want to come back, it'd be fun to have you again. It might be fun to talk about maybe some of the more obscure animated DC films, because there's a lot of animated DC films that I still need to watch. It might be
that's a path I could go down. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining me. I guess we will see you next time. See you on your channel, and I guess have a great day and enjoy the movie you're going to go see.
So hopefully Annabelle 3. We'll see if this one's enjoyable. Who knows? The Conjuring spin-offs are all over the place. So, all right, talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again to Sean for joining me for this episode. I'll have links to all his stuff in the description. Sean has several channels where you can find his work, but if you want more movie reviews, you can find him at Sean Chandler Talks About. Now, later this week, before we get to the next episode of the podcast, there will be a short bonus review on my YouTube channel. While I was putting together the final edit of the show today, I went to check something on Wikipedia and discovered that there was a stop-motion animated Christmas special about Buddy the Elf. I had no idea that such a thing existed, but I thought, we're already talking about Elf, why not review this other short thing as well? I have no idea what to expect with that, but I'll have my review for you later this week, so if you're only listening to the show on iTunes or Anchor or wherever else it is, Now is the perfect time to go subscribe on YouTube. Next week, we'll have another podcast episode of Christmas in July. My friend Katie Fabric will be joining me to talk about a Christmas film that was a childhood staple in her family, Jingle All the Way. And then, just to make things interesting, I discovered that there was a sequel, so we're also going to be talking about Jingle All the Way 2. I'm excited for the next episode, though that has a lot more to do with the guest than the topic, so we'll see you next week for another episode of the iHeart Podcast with Katie Fabric.